Hello, 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 everybody. I don't know if you can see me yet. I don't know if you can hear me yet, but hopefully you will in just a few minutes. I'm Zev Shalev. This is the FiveStack without Dean Blundell because Dean had to catch a flight. We were trying very hard to get him to join us, but he is not able to do it. So you're going to have just me doing a little bit of the FiveStack, just reading you the big stories of the day. I'm also using my non-traditional system here. So whatever you're used to seeing me, I can't see your messages, which is a little bit annoying to me because I love hearing from you. One of the nicest things about doing the show is we get to hear from you guys live what you think of us. Sometimes it's not the nicest in the world, but oftentimes you're very nice and supportive, and we really appreciate it. So I just want to make sure our stream is up and we are rolling, and then we'll get into the top five stories of the day, at least as they're currently configured. The news changes so quickly every second of the day these days; it's quite unbelievable. Um, how is everybody doing? I hope you're well. I can't see myself on the live stream yet, so let me confirm that it's actually out there. It doesn't seem to be playing for me. I wonder if it is for you guys, and I can't find out. I love technology. Technology makes me happy. There I am. I'm live right now. There you go. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here on the Five Stack. Thank you for joining us. It's good to be with you. Silence myself, and then we can get going. Look who's here. Lisa's here, Lenny's here, Callie's here, Annie's here. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for joining me. I need the company today. Without you, what would I do? I'd be pining and desperate for my friend Dean Blundell, who is such a busy cat these days. That man has a schedule that is quite unbelievable, and he deserves every bit of attention he's getting. He's done a remarkable job with deanblundell.substack.com. Friend of nature, hello from Quebec. Susan from South Carolina. Hi, Constitutional Patriot. Hi, hi, hi. Courtney, Carter, Noble Bland, Lisa. Thank you so much all for being here. I never get to do this part, and it's one of the nicest parts of the show is we get to say hello to each of you individually. Thank you for coming here today. Thank you for counting down the top five stories with me. Let's get into it. So the number five story, the White House demolition continues. The demolition of the White House East Wing into its third day Wednesday as the National Trust for Historic Preservation formally demanded Trump halt construction of his $250 million ballroom under proper federal review processes are complete, or at least until proper federal review processes are completed. They revealed that the National Capital Planning Commission, which has approval and oversight over all federal building projects in DC, was never consulted before backhoes started tearing into the East Wing on Monday. Now, this is a 90,000 square foot ballroom. It's much bigger than the actual White House itself. This is insane that this is actually happening without anybody granting approval. And you can see that it is actually bigger than the White House. The White House itself is only 55,000 square feet. And for anyone who's ever been there, I have the honor of being there a few times. It is very small. It's like a little home. It's like a nice home, but it's a little home. You know, it feels amazingly intimate when you're in there because you walk into the main dining room area. It doesn't hold hundreds of thousands, hundreds of people. It holds 30, 40 people comfortably. And that's what makes the White House a house. It is not designed to be a mansion. It is not designed to be a castle. It's designed to be a very simple home. That's why the president and his wife live up there above the White House. That's why it's just literally a home. So to imagine this giant, ostentatious Trump-like ballroom that he's building right there, attached to the East Wing, which used to be the offices of the president's wife, sorry, the first lady. It seems to me remarkably out of touch, and I'm so glad that the commission that is the Capital Planning Commission has gone ahead and revealed that they've had no approval over this particular project. The president is just doing whatever he wants. And this is not his property. This is the people's property. I mean, clearly he's indicating to all of us he has no intention of leaving, because why would you spend 200 million to build your own ballroom and then leave? That doesn't seem like it's very likely. Or there's something else going on here. I've heard lots of people comment about the fact that underneath this structure is the bunker. Is really is underneath, right where that is the old bunker. The bunker was built, I think, before World War II, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe it's even earlier than that. And that is an interesting place to be putting a ballroom on top of a bunker. So either they are going to have to do something with that bunker by removing it, changing it, I don't know, or there's something else going on that they're doing inside this ballroom which may incorporate the bunker, which may take them down 2 or 3 levels. The other thing that's really interesting, you know this about the White House, there are tunnels leading in and out of the White House from the various buildings, partly because they wanted people during the wars to be able to make it to work. So they created tunnels for easy access. So that is also interesting that this ballroom will be accessible via tunnels, apparently from the Treasury Department, which is right across the street. If I'm not mistaken, the Treasury is right across the street from there. A lot of our wealth is actually stored across the street. It's not Fort Knox, but there is a lot of money across the street there at the Treasury Department. And then they also intersect. I think there's a hotel nearby that you can gain access through via one of the tunnels. And then there's tunnels we don't even know about, tunnels that are really top secret. So we are looking at a major, major national security risk that they're undergoing with this particular investment of, $200 million by corporate sponsors. I mean, how ridiculous that corporate sponsors are going to be building this. What do they get in return? Because it's not just fine enough to say, well, these are just people who are donating this money. They are getting things in return. So what we are looking here is not just the construction of something by some well wishers. It is the construction of something that is certainly from the land of the people. This is not. This is the people's home, and it's being assumed ownership by Donald Trump, who's now going to build this ballroom. But what is he giving Google and Facebook and all these other companies that supposedly have sponsored this giant 90,000 square foot monstrosity? What is he giving them in exchange for that? And how is it possible that they thought it was okay for them to undergo this major demolition of part of one of the most historic buildings in America without getting any permission? Now, I was reading earlier on that the concern is not just about the fact that they had no permission. The concern is just about the design, because they're saying that the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which is a nonprofit created by Congress to help preserve historic buildings, sent a letter on Tuesday to the administration's officials warning that their planned 90,000 square foot ballroom will overwhelm the White House itself. So they're saying, from a pure aesthetics and design perspective, to have this giant monstrosity of 90,000 square feet, a ballroom like that, compared to a 55,000 square foot original White House, is just not a good idea from a design perspective. We respectfully urge the administration and the National Park Service to pause demolition until plans for the proposed ballroom go through the legally required public review processes. Carol Quillen, the National Trust CEO, said in a statement, citing 2 federal commissions that have traditionally reviewed White House additions. Now, if I'm not mistaken, there is also a tunnel that leads directly into the East Wing, which is a big part of how we had suspected a lot of the activity around the insurrection was coordinated, was people utilizing some of these tunnels to communicate back and forth with people outside. Can't say that's 100% what happened, but it's a real possibility that that is how this there's a tunnel leading directly into the East Wing, which could cause a challenge. I think it's the exact same tunnel, by the way, that was used to smuggle people like Monica Lewinsky in and out of the White House, if I'm not mistaken. And I think was it Reagan who had girlfriends? I don't know. Someone had girlfriends. Maybe it was Kennedy who had girlfriends that were smuggled in and out of the White House using the East Wing tunnels. The pedophilia story that is rising out of the Virginia Giuffre memoir is quite stunning, and we'll get to that later on in the show. We'll find out exactly what the intentions are for this particular thing. I don't think it's actually going to land up being built. I think it breaks every rule about what you should do with heritage buildings. On the other hand, this man does not care about the rules one bit. He seems to be breaking them day in and day out, and he might just not give a damn, which of course is very likely. Into our second story of the day. This one is not a surprise at all. Paul Ingrassia, who withdrew his nomination late on Tuesday to lead the office of the special counsel after Senate Majority Leader John Thune declared he's not going to pass. And even Republicans on the committee said they couldn't support him following Monday's Politico report. Now, if you remember, on Monday, Politico exposed text messages where he admitted to having a Nazi streak. Who admits something like that, a Nazi streak, used an Italian slur to say all Black holidays need to be eviscerated, and declared Martin Luther King Day, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, should be tossed into the seventh circle of hell. The 30-year-old Trump nominee, already under investigation for sexual harassment at Department of Homeland Security, lost support from Republican Senators Rick Scott and Ron Johnson, and even the main Jewish group that had been backing him. What is a Jewish group doing backing people like this? It just boggles my mind how acceptable the Nazi ideology has become amongst GOP circles, how they are just willing to embrace the notion that some sort of white supremacy, whatever that comes aligned with. But what we've seen in the last few days is the GOP leadership in various lower capacities, not in the Senate and not in the highest ranks of the GOP, but there are party members from the state legislatures. There are officials from all sorts of party support groups that have been texting pro-Nazi stuff. Now, I don't ever text anything remotely like that. I'm sure you never text anything like that. And the fact that this is so acceptable within the GOP, especially a GOP that claims to be in support of Israel, is not only confounding, because it really is hard to square those two off, but it is also appalling. And it's not just, as we were talking with Olga Lautman yesterday, this is not just about people saying Nazi things and they're not doing anything Nazi like. They are doing things that are Nazi like. You've got these vicious ICE crews that are roaming around the country, removing people simply based on how they look, their suspicion of being involved in some things when they're not even involved. On top of that, you've got a real movement towards to basically remove people as citizens of the country. You've got the ideas that you can't criticize the president of the United States in any way, that any criticism of the president is un-American. This is all very Nazi-like policies. And then on top of that, the reality of it is they're building a militarized paramilitary group, call it what you will, out of ICE. The illusion that ICE was just going to be there to remove illegal immigrants from the country is just not the case. I mean, we're seeing them buy the kind of arms that really looks like they're setting up for a civil war far quicker than it looks like they're going to be just doing this immigration thing. And why on earth do we need all those concentration camps? Call them holding facilities, call them whatever you want to call them. These are ultimately designed for millions of people to be disappeared, to be held against their rights across the country. There are black sites being built across the country. So this Ingracia story, yes, it's just one guy amongst many guys actually who are talking about Nazi things. But when you really dig down into what they're doing, the infrastructure is being built for a genocidal kind of Nazi approach to an ethnic cleansing. I mean, that just seems to be what's going on. Now, we've not seen any evidence that it's going to be that, but there's a pattern of that you can't ignore, that the infrastructure that they're building looks like it could be capable of disappearing a lot of that. When you add disappearing a lot of people, when you add on top of that people openly endorsing and espousing their Nazi streaks, you really have to question what is going on in America and why there is such a deafening silence. I'm glad Senator Thune spoke about this, but there is just a deafening silence from the Republicans on every level about what seems to be this growing Nazi tide and growing anti-Semitic tide seems to be growing in every way in America all the time. Love to hear your comments about those. And you guys are making some really good comments on the chat here. This is a tough story for everybody. Speaking to my dad the other day, who says his entire existence was forged out of the World War II, out of the Holocaust, out of understanding that story. He says everything about him, in terms of the way he views the world, is centered around that experience for him when he was a child. And he said something really interesting to me. He said the Holocaust, it was in black and white, because even though he was alive when it was happening, and World War II, he was alive when it was happening, he later lived the experience of that war through the movies, through the stories of that era, the news stories of that era, which were all in black and white. And it struck me that that's so true. We only visualize that horrific event mostly in black and white. We sort of see it as a different era. It feels so long time ago. It feels like it can't be possible in today's day and age. And it certainly makes you wonder what that will all look like if it would happen in our era today where there is so much media, so much social media, hardcore reality that we're constantly consuming. It really makes you wonder what would happen in this full tech colored world that we live in, where there are cameras everywhere, phones everywhere. What we will be witness to. Ultimately, it's just a horrific thought. And people need to start speaking out about this as forcefully as we can. There is a connection that's being made right now between Israel and American Jewry, which is not necessarily an accurate connection. Most American Jews would identify themselves as being against the Bibi Netanyahu government, which is doing many of the horrendous things that are happening in Gaza. And it's not the entirety of the Jewish population that can be blamed for what's happening in Israel. Yet that distinction is not something that anyone would ever apply when you're dealing with this context of Nazism, when you're dealing with this context of people just talking about gas chambers like it's nothing. We need to be very very cautious about where this path takes us, because it sure seems to me like things could be developing in a way there that it's hard to stop when you put all these people in power, when you put people like Ingracia in positions of power, and if they all espouse the same thinking and they want things to happen in a certain way and they want events to happen in a certain way. How do you stop them? It doesn't seem to me like it's that easy to do. Our number three story on the countdown today. There's so much interesting stuff happening around the Comey case. As it turns out, he's put up a pretty definitive argument about why his case should be dismissed. But in the meantime, the Justice Department, the purge continues. The Trump Justice Department fired two more federal prosecutors on Friday from the Eastern District of Virginia's Norfolk office. Elizabeth Yusi, who had been with DOJ since 2007, and Kristen Bird, the deputy chief of the Narcotics and Violent Crime Unit, were both let go after they told colleagues that there was no probable cause to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James, and expressed internal opposition to the politically motivated prosecution. It's now unclear who will even represent the DOJs at James's Friday arraignment in Norfolk, since the prosecutors who secured her indictment under Trump's personal lawyer, Lindsay Halligan, have no experience in that courthouse, and the systemic purge of career prosecutors continues across an office that handles the nation's most sensitive national security cases. And of course, this might be exactly what Trump is trying to do. Trump is trying to do a loyalty test by trying to prosecute all these enemies. He's trying to see who in the DOJ he can count on to not be truthful, to not follow the Constitution. And by identifying them through their opposition to these cases, which are trivial at best, stupid cases, we might be seeing, this is the kind of thinking a criminal like him would be doing. Where he only wants attorneys and prosecutors inside the Department of Justice that are willing to do all the dirty work. They don't care about the law. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about anything. They want to be serving his loyalty, and they want to gain whatever benefits that they gain from that. And it might be that what we're seeing here in all these attempts to go after Democrats, to prosecute Democrats, to perp walk them, to put Letitia James and James Comey as perp walkers, we're seeing them use that as the reason that they're purging a lot of these career prosecutors. Could this be just the very motivation for Donald Trump, that he's trying to really out everybody inside the Justice Department that won't adhere to him, that will ever oppose criminals like him, or prosecute criminals like him in the future? That's a real sense of where this is going for me. By the way, someone's just mentioning on the chat here that he's now talking about getting $230 million back from the Department of Justice, the people's money, for the prosecutions that he was guilty of. Let's be clear about that. The Mar-a-Lago case was dismissed not because it wasn't true. All those documents, he had stolen them and mishandled them. And these weren't just a few. There were thousands of documents stored in Mar-a-Lago that were classified, that were top secret. He had stolen those, and he had probably sold them to our adversaries, or to other nations, or to other interests, in order to make money. And the fact that that case was dismissed was entirely on procedural grounds, in that they decided that they would question validity of Jack Smith's appointment as a special counsel. But it is insane just to think that he can get his money back after that event, because really you're talking about real crimes monstrous crimes, maybe even treasonous crimes that took place. And the fact that there's even a possibility that he could get that money back is quite stunning indeed. The number two story on the countdown today is, I used to work at CBS News, so I have a special fondness for the place. The first time I walked into CBS, I was blown away by how lucky I was. I was like, here I am about to work at the Tiffany Network. I held that place in such high regard. I was given a tour by someone there who had been around for a while and took me down to the basement where he said, Walter Cronkite and company used to play cards down in the basement. There's also this incredible railway that runs at the basement of CBS News because during the Prohibition years, I guess this is what they were using to bring things in and out. But that basement was used as well. That railway was used as a way to get people in and out of the building when they needed to get them out for security reasons. People like Katie Couric, who we now see on Substack all the time, was used that exit during her reporting around the Alaskan governor, Sarah Palin, because there was so much media outside the building. My point is, the place is history. The place is just historic in terms of the way we understand America. It was, under Walter Cronkite, surely one of the most respected newsmen in the history of the world. He navigated America through some of the most difficult times. And that entire newsroom, many of whom I had the opportunity to work with in the late stages of their careers, they worked at 60 Minutes. These people are professionals. They're independent minded. They're not used to what's happening there right now, which is Barry Weiss rolling in with, get this, according to, by the way, she's the new editor in chief of CBS News. It's a new role that's been created for her. And she showed up at this Redbird Capital Media Conference on Tuesday at the New York Historical Society, surrounded by, and I can't tell you how off tone and this is, surrounded by 6 bodyguards described as beefy, chiseled, and resembling Hugh Jackman and Enrico Iglesias, forming a protective ring around the 41-year-old former Free Press founder, whose newsletter, which is basically a Substack newsletter, sold to Paramount Skydance for $150 million just weeks ago, before she was installed as the head honcho of CBS News. Now, she has no TV background or TV news background. She spent her first weeks at CBS creating internal upheaval and culture shock after bluntly asking 60 Minutes staffers why Americans view their program as biased, complaining about leaks, demanding producers book Netanyahu and Jared Kushner, and presiding over the exit of longtime Standards chief Claudia Milne, whom the newsroom is bracing for additional layoffs. Not layoffs just based on their merits, layoffs based on their abilities, not layoffs based on ratings, even layoffs based on their adherence to whether they support Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, this is what we've come to. The Ellison Group, which is responsible ultimately for purchasing CBS News through Sundance, are basically very, very close to Bibi Netanyahu. This is Ellison, who runs Oracle. There is a long history of how Oracle became such a powerhouse, but certainly one of the ways they did it was being very, very close to Bibi Netanyahu and the Israeli intelligence services. And to have Barry Weiss there now walking in and telling people who've worked there for decades how to operate, how they should be doing things, when they know what they're doing, they have a long history, a long line of very respected journalists that each time you walk into that building, you can't help but know that you have the burden of responsibility to live up to what those journalists had done before you. So to see Barry Weiss come in there, threaten people's jobs, demand that certain people appear on shows without even understanding the context, saying that all Americans view 60 Minutes as biased, which is, it's impossible to understand 60 Minutes as being a biased show. Not to mention, 60 Minutes is one of the best programs on CBS, and is one of the true unique times in the week where all Americans can get together and understand issues, take the time to really understand issues. And should they be booking Jared Kushner? Yes, I am interested in what Jared Kushner is doing. But if they're going to just use the 60 Minutes veneer to then make Jared Kushner seem like some sort of white knight who's saving the Middle East, when in reality, this peace deal is not enforceable and isn't being enforced properly. The whole thing is predicated on the fact that he wants to make money by turning it into either or both a real estate bonanza by building resorts all the way up and down Gaza, or secondly, to benefit from the gas and oil that can be extracted from there in deals that he's doing with Saudi Arabia and all these others. I mean, this is hardly a story to proclaim anyone a hero. This is about a corrupt money and land grab and oil grab by the oil producing nations of the world and the richest people in the world, trying to control the oil flow, trying to control the gas flow, and certainly trying to control this really important piece of land, which is the home of many Palestinian peoples. And just to say that you're going to turn it into some sort of resort paradise is just completely nonsense. Now, I imagine under Barry Weiss, when 60 Minutes does that story, they're going to be under enormous scrutiny and they won't be able to report the truth to Americans. And this is where the metal hits the road in terms of what all these buyouts of all these major networks are going after CNN, the same group, Ellison, are going after CNN, MSNBC's for sale. You can sort of see where a traditional media is all going to be operating out of the same billionaire group of loyalists who are loyal not just to Donald Trump, but loyal as well to Bibi Netanyahu and Israel. And I know that we just a minutes ago we were talking about Nazism and the rise of Nazism, and then on the other hand, you've got the rise of the sort of Zionist ownership of our media. Those two things, I don't know how they exist in the same place, but they're coming from the same group of people. It to me is mind-boggling. It's either a trick of some sort, or it's really designed to create enormous hardship for certain Jews while elevating others to positions of enormous power just because they agree with a certain perspective. 6 bodyguards, though. 6 chiseled bodyguards. And we'll end the show today with a number one story, which I have not yet read this book, although I've heard excerpts and I've heard the ghostwriter talk about it, and I know how earth-shattering it has been. Virginia Giuffre's memoir came out, and as you know, it is turning everyone's head because it is shocking what she went through. It's called Nobody's Girl. It hits bookshelves yesterday, October the 22nd. We did see the interviews go out this morning. You know, obviously, Ghislaine Maxwell comes out looking like a predator in this book, which is exactly why she was put away for so long. It's remarkable. The White House is still considering a pardon for her because, you know, the story is harrowing as it's told through Virginia Giuffre's voice. Even though she's died, she's left us these words posthumously clearly point to Ghislaine Maxwell as being not only a predator, but a groomer and a sexual deviant, really. What else can you call someone who does the things that she does? It's amazing to me that the White House is still considering pardon for her. It just tells you how much more information must be available in those Epstein files that people are just not seeing. Hopefully, at some point in the near future, we can finally get to see those Epstein files from the FBI. They're so crucial. And by the way, not only the Epstein files from the FBI, the Trump administration is also sitting on the Treasury files, the suspicious activity reports over many years, over 15 years, maybe longer, of people from the banks, JP Morgan, and also from Deutsche, who complained about the activity in Jeffrey Epstein's accounts. They reported it to the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department has this trove of incredibly important information that they have no reason to be withholding it, and yet they're withholding it. So, you know, why is the Treasury Secretary Bessent doing this? Why is he withholding this very vital trove of information? This is beyond just what the FBI files and the FBI documents. This is a separate set of documents that only Bessent can release, and yet he's refusing to do that. Can you imagine why? Only if it's really damaging to Donald Trump and his friends, and you can bet that they're really damaging to Donald Trump and his friends. So, you know, seeing this through line as we're getting to witness it now of Virginia Giuffre's suffering as a young girl. You know, Ellie Leonard was talking to me earlier about the horrific story of Virginia's father, who clearly trafficked her himself, it seems like, from the early stages of this book. And not only that, that he worked at Mar-a-Lago and got her the job at Mar-a-Lago. And her father apparently also went to see Jeffrey Epstein when Virginia Giuffre was there at Epstein's home, which means he may have been aware of some of the things that were going on there. Of course, his daughter was trafficked by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell for many years. just imagining that through line and then imagining these sorts of people now running the government, now running the presidency, now withholding all this vital information from the people, now doing everything they can to control the information flow so we believe only their line of questioning and only their lines of narratives of the news. And you just, you're just sick into your stomach when you think about the people who will do so much harm to a young girl like Virginia Giuffre, who will ruin her entire life and think nothing of it because they are trading her like an object. To see that reality, portrayed to us through her posthumous book, and to imagine these same guys are building this gaudy ballroom and are, engaged in all this hypocritical behavior around the world where they're killing people in order to gain their waterfront property or their gas rights. It sickens you. It really does. The same people who are out there talking about Nazism like it's a parlor joke, like you can just talk about it in chat rooms and it's okay to joke about the gas chambers. These are the same people. These are the same cruel people who think nothing of making gas chamber jokes, who think nothing of taking a young girl's life and many young girls' life and just wrecking them by trafficking them to so many people. And these are the same people who are, at this very moment, hiding all this valuable information which could reveal their crimes because they've taken over our Justice Department and are now busy purging it of every decent person inside the Justice Department. It is about as dark and dystopian a situation as we can have. And yet here we are in this country at this time dealing with all of this. And I'm going to try say something that's, as dark as defeating as all these stories are, they are also something that can really ground your protest and to affirm you in what you believe in and how important it is right now that everyone's voice is heard. I know that apprehension is the number one thing that is stopping people from going out there and protesting every day, from having their voices be heard. And I'm preaching to the converted here. Many of the people who watch this show aren't people who are apprehensive about protesting. But we do need a sustained effort, and we need a sustained effort that is loud and clear and has clear demands against even just the smallest things that the administration is doing. I spoke to Lev Parnas yesterday on this show, and I spoke to Olga Lautman later on the Trump tyranny tracker, and I'm putting together a story which I'll post soon on narrative.org about how we can achieve some of that. What will it take? What does it look like to have a sustained protest outside the White House on a regular basis? What are the steps we need to take? What are the things we need to think about? How do we do it? And I hope people start to rally around this idea, not as a Democrat versus Republican thing, not as a movement that is partisan in any way. I think it's important for the people of America, no matter what your political supports are, to be out there, to be expressing your horror at what is going on, because we know it's going to get worse. We know that what we're protesting against today, we can only imagine the multitudes of times worse it's going to be in a year from now or 2 years from now. And when you look back, if your future self is looking back at today, you would have wanted to do even more. Use all this information that is dark and sad and depressing as something to steel yourself, to build the fortitude you need, and to think strategically about how you can take action yourself as an American to stop us from entering this cataclysmic stage of that we could be entering, where we're just enter a lawless country where all the worst kinds of things imaginable might be happening. So before America falls into that abyss, we have an opportunity here still as a country which still has a constitution, which still has the rights of protest in place, to protest. And it's inconvenient, of course. No one wants to go out there on a cold night and be there for hours at a time. But there are ways to schedule these things, to plan these things out. And it's going to require people like you to just pick up and do it. Now, to organize it as well. And I would say I would do it, but I'm in Canada. I have a green card and all those things, but I'm not the person who should be doing this. I think there are so many capable, brilliant organizers, planners, political voices, people who care about the judicial framework of America. The people are there. And I just encourage all of you to read this article and do whatever it is you think you can do, and then some. Try and do it. If it means you can put together a group of people who might be interested in volunteering, if you think you can help organize the messaging, if you think you can help organize the permits, it's going to be impossible to get permits. Just the argument for the permits going to take for months. But let's get this thing going. Let's start thinking about what it would take to have a sustained protest. History shows us that sustained efforts are the only things that work to move authoritarians. Now, I'm not calling for a revolution. This is not a revolutionary call. I'm not calling for a change of regime. I am calling for these basic issues to be addressed time in and time out. ICE people who are marching in and with masks on their face. Why do we have a paramilitary that's anonymous, that's unidentifiable in America, working against anybody in America? That is un-American, and we should demand that that stop. That's achievable. The Epstein files, both the Treasury ones and the Epstein files at the FBI, we can get those. We should get those. Those belong to the people. Let's have them transferred to the people so we can see what went on in the Epstein world. There are so many other issues that are this attempt to go to war with Venezuela. We can't have a war against Venezuela without congressional approval. We should demand that. We should be out there at the White House every day demanding that we only go to war unless when the law is followed. We can't go to war because the president of the United States has declared that he wants to go to war. That is not how things work. And there are issues after issues like that that are real foundational working issues. We're not saying overthrow the government. We're saying let's build a people's movement of every nonpartisan person we can think of who cares about these fundamental issues, who cares about the American Constitution, who cares about our rights, our freedoms based on that Constitution, and who wants to get these issues sorted out. And the only place we can get them sorted out is by going to the White House and demanding that the White House at least and hear us and address these issues. They've got to be achievable issues, and I think there are many out there that they are. And I think we can organize something that works effectively and well. Um, Everyone's saying Venezuela is canceled. The military said no. Indeed. I'll be talking to Terence Goggin today at 7 p.m. about how exactly that happened. But Venezuela is not being canceled. It doesn't mean that the president of the United States still does not have his intentions to go to war with Venezuela. The military said no, but they'll find somebody else to fill that admiral's shoe, and that admiral or that new appointee may say yes. So please do not. Terence Goggin, the West Point professor, will be on with me at 7 p.m. We'll be talking about exactly this, and I'm also going to talk to him a little bit about this buildup of militarization of the ICE paramilitary, which is going to be the size of the Marines, really, when you think about it. And he's now procuring missiles and hand grenades for what? The only answer I could think of is civil war, and I hope that's not the case. Thank you for being here on the FiveStack. Dean offers his big regrets, and I did my best to fill in the hour as best we could. Dean and I will be back for our usual stuff tomorrow at 3 p.m. Thank you for letting him do this. He apologizes for not being here. Thank you for allowing me to stream on deanblundell.substack.com. Thank you for being here on narrative.org, narrativ.org. This is where I cover a lot of the Epstein stuff. I have a great story coming out today and a follow-up on the story around why Jamie Dimon, the guy from JP Morgan, ignored all the Epstein stuff for 15 years. And the answer isn't just about him ignoring the stuff. Why did he finance Epstein for 15 years? Why did he allow for the funding of this major criminal network? And when you extend that, you got to wonder whether there were benefits to Jamie Dimon from doing that. Understanding what did he learn? What knowledge did he gain? Did he have insider knowledge about what intelligence agencies were doing around America in order to allow Jeffrey Epstein to continue to fund through JP Morgan? These are all good questions that need to be answered. So this story is not just a story about Jeffrey Epstein. It's not just a story about the girls. It's not just a story about Ghislaine Maxwell. It's a story about a major financial crime network that has robbed America blind, and we'll continue to report that on Narrative. All right, that's it from me. Thanks again for being here today. And I shall see you at 7 p.m. when I'll be with Terence Goggin. And maybe I'm going to try to get Ellie to join us to talk about her incredible piece that she did, Ellie Leonard, about Virginia Giuffre's father, Sky Roberts. That's all I have for you now. See you later.